President Obama wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post on the issue of solitary confinement, and he's decided he's against it, apparently, and he's taking action. He says, quote, "The Justice Department has completed its review, and I am adopting its recommendations to reform the federal prison system. These include banning solitary confinement for juveniles and as a response to low-level infractions, expanding treatment for the mentally ill, and increasing the amount of time inmates in solitary can spend outside of their cells. These steps will affect some 10,000 federal prisoners held in solitary confinement and hopefully serve as a model for state and local corrections systems." Okay, so he goes on to talk about the psychological damage that some of the studies are beginning to prove about what happens when people are in solitary confinement, and how so many people who have been in solitary confinement, when they get out and then they get out of prison, they end up committing suicide. There's a whole bunch of troubling stuff around that, and some very smart people have said, it's kind of torture. We're talking about torture here. Well, I mean, humans are social animals. We're social beings, and if you lock them up in a cage and leave them there for 24 hours a day or an extended period of time, they lose touch with reality, and I think more importantly, you're compounding the problem. So if the whole idea of putting people in jail is to protect society, but also to give a chance of rehabilitation and to try to make people productive, normal citizens, well, you're going to make it worse if you lock them up in a room and throw away the key, and then you let them out a week later, whatever the fuck it is, and now the person's off their rocker. It's wrong on so many levels, and he's saying, for juveniles, done, it's over. No more solitary confinement for juveniles, and for low-level infractions, it's over. He didn't give specifics on what he means by low-level infractions, but this is good, and this is a step in the right direction. Now, there were parts of his piece where he said, in some cases, it is justified according to the Justice Department review, because, you know, if there's a fight and it's to protect, you know, the security of one inmate or another inmate, or it's to cool off a situation that's gotten out of control or whatever, in those situations it's okay. I hear you on that, but I think the response is, as long as it's super limited and regulated. So if you need to put somebody in solitary to protect them or protect somebody else because of a fight or this or that, you can work that out and talk and figure it out together, you know, on a case-by-case basis. But if you're forcing somebody into that situation, should there be a limit on it? You know, a max of a few hours or something like that? Probably. There probably should be. And look, guys, I've said time and time again, I'm not like a pure, down-the-line liberal or progressive on criminal justice issues. I fancy myself a moderate. You know, I think that the U.S. is far too punitive, and we don't care about rehabilitation nearly enough. But I think, in all seriousness, Scandinavia and places like that might be too lax and too lenient, and, you know, their idea of, in every case, you can never have a life sentence without the possibility of parole. I don't agree with that. Now, I know people say, just because you have the opportunity or the chance of a parole hearing doesn't mean they're actually going to grant parole. That's true. Don't get me wrong. But are there some crimes that are so heinous and some people that are so beyond rehabilitation that, yeah, it's the right thing to put them in jail and not even give the option of somebody perhaps fucking up down the road and letting them out? Yeah, perhaps I'm more conservative in that respect. So overall, I'm like a moderate on the issue of criminal justice. I think sometimes you just need rehabilitation for certain kinds of crimes, and I think probably most times you need a mix of rehabilitation and punishment. And then are there crimes that are so heinous that, you know, you should basically be locked up, treated humanely, but locked up for life? Yes, you know, I'm guilty of that. So I'm a moderate on this issue, but to Obama's point here, I don't think this is disputable. To say, hey, this is cruel and unusual punishment to do solitary confinement for juveniles, yeah, you become the bad guy if you want to do that, when we know that this is psychologically damaging and it's basically torture, okay? And to say, hey, for low-level infractions, you can't lock somebody up in a cage and keep them there for a week. Yeah, of course. You know, he goes on to point out in his piece, we started solitary in like the 1800s, and it was like a barbaric thing then, and it's still super barbaric today. It's not like over time, just because we're used to it, it must not be as bad. No, it's pretty fucking bad. It's pretty fucking bad. So I would move away from solitary because it doesn't help the situation at all. and it leads to further damages, and it kind of reflects more on you than the prisoner. It reflects more on the system than the prisoner. You become a bad guy yourself when you do that stuff. So I agree with him on this. I'd probably go a little bit further in my crackdown, but perhaps he's doing all that he can do within the confines of being the president and not working through Congress and stuff. And just so everybody knows, what he's doing is constitutional, because some are saying executive overreach. That's not true. Spending bills have to originate in Congress. You don't need to spend anything to tell people you can't do that anymore. In federal prisons, you cannot do solitary anymore. Well within his abilities to do that. So I think he's right. I would have gone a little further, but at least we're moving a step in the right direction here with making our criminal justice system better. The next thing would be legalize, tax, and regulate all drugs. I won't hold my breath for that. But on marijuana, perhaps I will hold my breath because we're moving towards that, at least with that.